I'm also a member of Chapter 15, which was formed in like 1955 over in the south suburbs of Chicago. I'll get back to that a little bit, but at the moment, Chapter 15 is hosted by the Lewis University Airport, owned and operated by the Joliet Port District. That's the official name of the airport. It's been the same since I did this presentation 20 years ago, 19 years ago. And guess what? My memory isn't the best, so I've got some crib notes here. I just want to give you some highlights. The fact that I can't remember everything is probably going to mean that we'll get this presentation done in a reasonable amount of time tonight. Anyway, just to give you the background, you see this little placard or panel, we called them here, about, I don't know, 22 years ago, late 1999 or so, we had a member, Frank Goebel, who was one of the, I think, charter members of Chapter 15, and or a very early member. Frank was interested in the history of the chapter and of the airport, and he started collecting 8x10 photos. And then he got leukemia. And so there was a request for someone to help Frank with this presentation, or with this project. What he wanted to do was frame the pictures and hang them in the new terminal building, which had just been dedicated over at Lewis Airport. I volunteered to help with that, and it didn't, these are big hallways, they're 100 feet long each, and we had both sides of the hallways that we could use. And Frank had about a dozen pictures. So we got together, and I thought it would look better if we had a bigger format, which is why we did the kind of museum type photo format that you see there. All together we made 22 of these, and I'll show you an example as we do the presentation. But just so you get the background there, Frank and I worked together on the history of the airport. We had a lot of people helping us, especially a brother in the religious group that was operating the school at Lewis University at that time.
I need to say something.
Yeah.
The tie-in with that is Travis Christoph just got a $5,000 scholarship from EAA, and he's going to that college.
You're going to Lewis? Oh, Travis, not Tristan.
Trevor.
Oh, Trevor, really?
Trevor, who's been coming to our meetings, so that makes us actually 4 different young people who have been involved with our chapter, have received money from EAA. And he's home on, I think he's home on spring break, but he just received information. Adam, do you remember the name of anyway, $5,000 scholarship. He got
Fantastic. Yeah, he'll need it. There's a full university now over there. Okay, so let's move ahead, and we'll get into this. And at the end of the history presentation, we got a little bit about how we did our project. So, it's 1930, 3 years after Lindbergh's historic flight, solo flight across the Atlantic. Deep in the Depression, a lot of crap going on in Chicago, inner city kids getting into trouble and stuff. There was in the Catholic Archdiocese there, an associate bishop, Bernard Scheel, and he was subordinate to the patron Archbishop, Cardinal Mundelein. You may have heard the name Mundelein around Chicago. I think that was him. Anyway, Bishop Scheel was intent on finding things for young men to do, teenage kids to do, to get them out of this cycle of poverty that everyone was sliding into, where they kind of had to, get into crime to get by and that sort of thing. He was trying to find things for them to do. So he founded a group called the Catholic Youth Organization. It's kind of like a YMCA, which is a Protestant thing, but the CYO, which incidentally my brother belonged to when I was a kid, it was conceptualized as athletic and social. It was kind of a thing that parishes could do and so forth. It survives today, but it was more popular back in the 20th century. Anyway, it was a kind of a community and constructive leisure thing to do, and the structure was similar to YMCA, except that it included Catholic teachings, and the word here is New Deal ideology. In other words, things to do that helps move forward and toward an end to the recession or the depression that we were in. New Deal, as you know, included WPA, Works Progress Administration, other constructive things that were going on. So also in 1930, he's going, well, okay, I've got something to kind of get the attention of these kids, but I really want to get these boys out of the city. It's just not a good location for them. So he didn't have any means to do that, but he was inspired by Lindbergh, and he said, you know what, technology is the way to go for young boys. I think I'm going to found a school of aeronautics, which he did. In 1930, he founded the Holy Name School of Aeronautics without a building, without a property. He just founded the school, and he thought, if I found it, something will happen. And something did. And I think there's a little bit of legend going on here, because these dates cross over a little bit. But there was a farmer in Lockport, Illinois, which is right next door to the Lewis University and Romeoville and Joliet. They're kind of all clustered in there. Anyway, this Michael Fitzpatrick, his father was Patrick Fitzpatrick, who immigrated from Canada in 1830, and he started a 160-acre farm in Lockport. It was along what they called the Chicago-Ottawa stage line, which, if you know that area now, is Route 53, which eventually was paralleled by I-55. So it's kind of that Route 66 kind of area there. Anyway, Route 53 is a main drag in Joliet all the way up to Schaumburg and beyond that into Wisconsin. He eventually grew his farm to 1,200 acres. When Patrick died, he passed the farm on to Michael. Michael and his wife Frances farmed it there until 1930, and they retired. And they had a rather small family, but they were devout Catholics. They were involved in the church, and Michael donated 160 acres to the Archdiocese of Chicago with the direction that they could use it for whatever useful purpose they wanted to. And Bishop Shield had a cow. He's going, wonderful. I've got some land. So just to kind of show you, then the Fitzpatricks died out. They were there was not enough of a family force there, I guess, to keep that going. So anyway, two kind of visions united there. Michael wanted to give some opportunity, and Bishop Shield had a need for it. This is the groundbreaking of the Holy Name Technical School in 1931. The guy on the left, I know his name, but he's not significant. I think he was just kind of there. I'm not sure if he was a teacher or what. I think Bishop Shield is the next fella. Of course, Fitzpatrick is the next one. The next one over, the third from the right, is one of the Franciscan brothers, I think, that were involved in the school. And then the two guys on the right are probably the builder and the architect. So that was the groundbreaking of the Holy Name School. You see the kind of equipment they were working with there. There's a big flat area. It's probably ideal for an airport. It was pasture land and farmland. So somehow, and I'll talk about a benefactor in a moment, but somehow they managed to get a building built in 1932. This was the first building of Lewis University. It was a combined hangar, classroom, kitchen, dining area, workshop. Everything they had was in this building. Later on, you can see the left side of the building here, so you know this is an old photo. But later on, you'll see how they built onto that. You can see the little cross on the chimney and the flagpole and the windsock. They did not have an airfield. They did not have any aircraft working or even flying, or anyone who knew how to fly. It's kind of like build it and they will come, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened. So the next thing that happened was there was a fella, Frank Lewis, was a pretty wealthy guy, headed for retirement. It so happened he retired, I think, in 1930. And he was a benefactor to the archdiocese already. He knew Archbishop Mundelein, and he had built his fortune in tar. So he developed ways to make tar and asphalt and things like that to build roads. So that was his fortune. And he had a lot of money left when he was done, so he became kind of a, a philanthropist. And he was hooked up with the archdiocese, and very soon after that he got hooked up with the technical school. This is a staged photo, obviously, but does anyone recognize the engine? Is that a Kinner or?
OX5.
OX5? Is that, who makes that or who made that?
John Bruesch.
OX5, huh? Okay, that was what they had in Jenny's, wasn't it? The old World War I vintage engine? Okay. So by 1935, see if I building right here, and you see this is the part that I showed you a picture of before. They've already built onto it with the help of Frank Lewis. They built some other classrooms and such around in here, and some other buildings down here, and a 50,000-gallon water tower. And then they built this drive, which survives to the present day, although it's been squared off a little bit. This drive goes out to Route 53, and you can come in and take a big loop through the college. And you'll see how this develops as we go along too. This is looking north. This is a road here that they call Airport Road now. I don't know what it was called back then. And this is the old stage road, Route 53, going up toward Downers Grove and up there. You can't see any evidence of a little town that's now called Romeoville. If you know Romeoville, it belongs right in here. So, aviation. How are we going to get something that's like an airplane or maybe something? So there was this guy, Al Luke, they called him. We actually have a little history on him that I won't go into today, but he was a barnstormer, and he had what they called a Swallow biplane. I think Matty Laird had something to do with the development of the Swallow. And that's not what this is. Jim, you probably know what this is.
So. It's either a Howard or a Monaco.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, but it's too big to be a Swallow. Anyway, this Al Luke flew in to kind of consult with Bishop Scheel on how they could make an airfield there. And they looked at a 40-acre pasture, and Al Luke said, I could do something with this. Why don't you hire me? So they did. And he stayed a long time. He wasn't as footloose as you might think a barnstormer would be. He stayed, he taught, he developed even during World War II, he developed a helicopter training program there. So he was an ambitious fella, and he managed to get an airport made, and he brought in the first aircraft that was resident there. Here's in 1936, they got some money from the WPA, so they could start making runways and grading some runways. The guy up here is, I forget his name. This is Frank Lewis here. Oh, this guy, I don't remember his name, but he was the superintendent of the school. And there's some other folks standing around too. Whoops. This is the first hangar they built. They call this the round roof hangar. It was built in 1940 or 1939 or so. And it survived up until maybe 2010 or so. It was in the way of an ILS, is what I heard.
Really?
Whether that was a...
2010, huh?
Yeah, whether that was a radio interference or an actual physical interference, I'm not sure. But in any case, they finally took it down. This hangar was built, designed, legend says, was designed by this fella, Umberto Nobile. He was hooked up with Roald Amundsen, a polar explorer. And, you know, one of these guys that takes people on very cold walks to the North Pole. No one had flown over the North Pole yet. In fact, Admiral Byrd and these guys were in competition. And this expedition that Nobile and Amundsen organized in 1926 was actually successful and documented. And what they did was, this fellow Nobile, he had designed a dirigible. It's kind of like a blimp, but it had a steel bottom on it. The bag on the top was loose, but the bottom had kind of a steel keel or something, which he designed specifically for polar exploration and, you know, being on the ice and all that. So he designed it and was the pilot. Amundsen was the leader of the expedition. They flew over the pole all the way almost to Nome, Alaska. So this was the first overflight of the North Pole to get from Europe, Norway, over to North America. They didn't quite make it to Nome. They landed at a place called Teller, Alaska, and they shipped the thing. They disassembled it and took it back to Europe for a museum, I guess. But it's called the Norge. And Norge in Norway means Norway. So that's why they called it the Norge. But anyway, they believed that he had designed this hangar too because it's big enough for a dirigible. And the boys, I guess, the teenage boys did a lot of the welding on it, and the workmanship, they say, was well enough that, you know, it lasted all those years.
Hey, John, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So up to this point, or at some time it was beyond the philanthropy money and it was somehow paying students to go to this school, or? Yeah, the Archdiocese had a, you know, it's funny you should ask because we talked about the process here a little while ago. The Archdiocese had a process whereby individual parishes could nominate a boy to go to this school, and parents or you know, parish priests or whatever would get together and put the young people forward, and then they would you know, get selected for being in the school.
By the way, or Archbishop Mundelein, he later became a cardinal, I think, he was very keen on equal opportunity, race, creed, gender. And it took a while, but for now, this is all boys, right? This is just for boys. But eventually you'll see that the school went co-ed.
Is this a Catholic university?
Mm-hmm. Strictly Catholic up until a particular point where we'll get to. 1940. Thanks to Al Luke and some other things that were going on, there was an influx of soaring and gliders at the Lewis School. There were some other manufacturers involved too. One, the Franklin Company, which you'll see, we'll come back to that a little bit, and a company called Globe, not the same Globe as the Globe Swift, but Franklin Globe was making gliders for the war. And so you can kind of see that they got involved in this as the CYO activity. They hosted this 3rd annual American Open Soaring Contest, and from their 40-acre airport or whatever they had back there at that time. It's interesting to read some of the records and stuff that they have there. This is interesting. There was a guy, Eugene McDonald, he was the president, I think, or CEO of Zenith, which used to make, for those of you who are too young, used to make radios and TVs and shit. He invented a wind machine. They wanted to be able to teach the boys to fly these gliders without actually having to tow them up into the air. Some of the gliders were single place, so they didn't want to send these boys, you know, not their own boys, but someone else's kid up in a glider all by himself to learn how to fly it. So the brain fart that they had was to create a wind machine, and you'll see in this next clipping, the idea was to have 4 of these wind machines lined up side by side. Each wind machine had 99 stovepipes in front of the blade in a cluster to collimate the wind and stop some of the swirl that it was doing so that a glider could actually fly. And believe it or not, the thing worked. It just didn't work very well. From some of the, yield 35 to 45 mile an hour airflow yielded a horizontal current in which a tethered glider could be flown under close supervision from the ground. I'll bet that was quiet, huh? McDonald demonstrated his machines to the public in 1941. An experienced pilot can hold the machine level and perform many basic flight maneuvers. The beginners who flew the machine bounced up and down and jerked erratically from side to side as they made errors in handling the controls. All, however, landed safely and proved the inventor's claims. Interesting. I wonder if that machine is still around somewhere. Not that I'd want it. Okay, so now World War II, as you know, a lot of American companies and organizations and even schools got involved in the war. And for Lewis, it meant the Civilian Pilot Training Corps, which was an organized effort to use existing flight schools to help train military pilots. And what happened ultimately, they had some Wacos, which I think is what these are.
Those are Wacos.
Yeah, and then they had some Stinson monoplanes and some Piper Cubs for primary. And so you see they've got a concrete tarmac and everything going on there. The place is growing. These are the same Wacos, aren't they? But the military took it over, and little by little the military came in. Eventually it was the Navy, and when the Navy came in, they asked first the high school kids to leave so they could take over their quarters. And then they asked the college, there were some college courses being offered by that time as well. They asked the college boys to go home too. And they took this place completely over for the duration of the war. After the war, 1946, here's that original building I was telling you about, the water tower Frank Lewis built. These are the hangars that they built for the aircraft, built these during the war. Here's the original round roof hangar. This is looking north, I think, by the way, and then the runways are open. And this, I think, is part of the school at the time. And that round drive you still see coming through here.
So that very first building that they put up over there?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The attachments that you're seeing there off to the left, is
That-
that school and classrooms, or is that strictly for aviation, airplanes and stuff?
It would have been, Frank Lewis built this, so it would have been an additional hangar and additional class/workshop space. And I think they added a cafeteria in there somewhere too. So here's a picture of one of the daily retreat ceremonies that they do at the end of the day. Navy was big on that, I think. Had some other pictures of this too, but this is a graduation. You can see the photographer here with this. I love the loudspeakers. You can just hear a Sousa march, can't you, on those?
Pilots, mechanics, what?
Pilot instructors for the Navy. They were teaching pilots to become instructors for the Navy so that they could go out and multiply, I think. Mm-hmm. Gliders. So this Frankfurt, I think, was the guy's name. He was building gliders up in Michigan. He was building gliders that the military was using. One was called Cinema 1 and 2, or TG1, Training Glider Model 1 or something. Anyway, he built a school, he started a school of soaring at the airport. So this was not a religious thing, but on Lewis's airport, he started a glider school. And then soon he formed a corporation called Globe Manufacturing. Again, not the Swift people, but a different Globe. And he built a factory, which is what I think this is. In this site today, there's a Voc-Tech school, a vocational school. It's just off to the south of the airport, pretty much on the airport property, but not associated with Lewis University. And this is what he was, Stanley Corcoran was his name. So he was building these Globe Cinema 2s. It's a two-place, I think it's a side-by-side, I'm not sure. TG1 it was called, and this was one of the standard primary gliders that the military was using in World War II. This is a later photo of him posing with a museum piece. After the war, this Globe company got into drones, John. So this is what their drones look like. I think this one is up in Oshkosh, I think. I think this is somebody's composite picture of a drone that's hanging in some museum. I think it might be Oshkosh. I know they've got one of these. It's got an inline or a V4 engine in it. They also built one with a pulse jet engine. Looks like a buzz bomb, doesn't it? It looks just like a V1 to me. But that's not a rocket, it's a pulse jet. I think anybody understands there's probably a big difference there between a rocket and a pulse jet. So yeah, so they were building drones for a while there. After the war is over, Navy up and leaves. They give everything back to the Archdiocese of Chicago, say, take over, you know. Archdiocese comes back in with the boys. So this is I think the upstairs of that, either that building or the attachment next to it. Boys are learning how to cover cover planes. In 1949, they started trying to get young ladies to join, to come in and go to their school. This would be problematic later on, but for about 10 years, Lewis was teaching young ladies about aeronautics as well. So making good on their promise not to discriminate. In 1955, they had built this little building here. I've been in there. The brothers were living in there, you know, kind of like it was called the President's Residence because the President built it for himself. It was just kind of a nice little bungalow kind of, it's probably the nicest residence on, on the place. And then when later, in later years, the brothers lived in there, the teaching brothers. So over here you have some academic space. Over here, the airport stuff, the hangars that the military left behind, I think, are here. And now we can see the runways. This is runway 927.
927?
927, yeah. That exists today. This is not a runway, it's a taxiway. It was heading out to a future runway, which was a north-south runway that hadn't been built yet. This is a grass runway, and this is a taxiway for that, I think. Here's an aerial view of that. See, there's no north runway here yet. Now, I don't know if this is a runway or a taxiway. It looks, I think it's just a taxiway because there's a building here and there's buildings down here. It's not a very good picture, but now you can see the village of Romeoville starting to build up alongside. Still got that circular, still got the Route 53 going here. Michael Fitzpatrick's house is right about here, I think. Maybe a little farther down. But that's a National Historical Marker now that you can go there and tour it if you have an organization that's hooked into it. And then, of course, all the school stuff here.
It looks like a railroad spur that comes around.
Yeah, there's some kind of a railroad going there. The Illinois Michigan Ship Canal or Sanitary Canal is just above here, running this way. If you're familiar with that area over there. I used to think it was the drain for Lake Michigan. So now we're up to, actually, we're going to come back in a bit, but EAA Chapter 15 had been located in a handful of different airports, including Mitchell Field, not Milwaukee's Mitchell Field, on the northwest suburbs of Chicago, Ashburn Field, Harlem Airport, Wings Field. Every time they would go and be hosted at an airport, the chapter would get kicked out because the airport would close. That's what was going on in Chicago. In fact, one of the members, he's not in this photo, Nick Selig, has written 2 books on all of the different airports that used to be in the Chicago area. I think he calls it the ghost airports of Chicago or something like that.
I think I got that book.
Do you? Yeah, Nick has passed away, but his books are probably available on eBay. Anyway, this guy was one of the charter members, Marty Hetler. Not Hitler, Hetler, H-A-E-D-T-L-E-R. And he was a P-39 pilot on Guadalcanal. He crashed his airplane, it messed up his hearing, it messed up some of his other faculties as well. He was not able to fly anymore after World War II. but he was a big force in EAA back in the day, and he built this aircraft, and he built a Whitman tailwind. Couldn't fly them, but he built them, and then he'd go flying with other people, of course. We got Carl Unger here. We got George Linkus, who built a Mustang II. George Linkus was probably the most energetic, aggressive chapter president I've ever worked with. He wanted to do everything. He had big plans. It's too bad that he passed away, but he was already well into his 80s when he passed away. I think this is Arnie Zimmerman, but I'm not sure. Does anyone know Arnie? Yep. These are the two breezy guys, right? Carl and Arnie. Yep. And Arnie flew him out of Chicago for a long time. Yep. And I don't know who the guys in the front row are, but that's a beautiful airplane. I wonder where it is these days. EAA was into air shows and stuff. There was a Chicago or a regional fly-in. It was called the it escapes me. Anyway, so this is one of their fly-ins. You see the school back here. They've got a running track now, and this is a taxiway. These are some of the planes they lined up there. Probably serving pancakes somewhere around here. But sometimes they would have air shows at these things, you know, actual air shows. And the chapter had a project. They bought materials for 12 Stolp V-Stars, which is a single-seat Starduster. Hope I got that right. Anyway, it's not a Starduster, but it's a single-seat biplane that Stolp designed. They bought enough kits for 12 of these, and they realized how hard it was to mass-produce home-built aircraft. So they knocked it down to, let's see if we can just get one plane finished, and whoever puts in the most hours on it can pay it off and own the airplane. It wound up that 3 guys went together on this aircraft and flew it for a while, and then they sold it to a guy named Bob Deutsch, who was also a chapter member. Bob owned it up until he was stricken with some kind of a dementia.
Bob?
Do you know him?
Did you know him?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you did. Has he got a son or relative named Gene Deutsch?
I'm not sure. Bob was into ballroom dancing. He was, as a widower, I guess. He always had a, he was a nice guy. Great guy to know. So, Lewis, back to the school. So in 1960, backtracking a little bit, the Archdiocese decided that this school was growing too fast for the brothers that were running it, and they needed some leadership. So they brought in this Irish fellow, Brother Paul McGinnis, and they put him in charge. He was in charge, he was involved in a Christian Brothers group called the Christian Brothers. And I'm not sure what the LaSalle Brothers of Christian Schools, simply the Christian Brothers. And the Christian Brothers took the university and basically its post-war format, and they just really grew it. They really started working. Their goal, Brother McGinnis's goal, was to get the school accredited by the Northwest or North Central Accreditation organization that gives the certificates to all of the colleges in the Midwest. He wanted it to be a full university, co-ed and all of that. Oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't have said that. The problem he had was by this time for almost 10 years, or a number of years anyway, the school had been teaching young ladies. And the Christian Brothers had they weren't a cloister, but they only taught men. They did not teach women. So he had a tough row to hoe there because he had to kind of kick the young ladies out. But then a few years later, any Catholics in the group, a thing called Vatican II happened, which was a council in Rome with the Pope, and the decision was that Catholic schools would be equal opportunity for women. So after they kicked them all out, they had to kick them back in. So in the later 60s, young ladies were going to the school again. There was a moment there when things got kind of dicey.
So do they have brothers and nuns there as well as teachers?
Not nuns, just brothers.
To this day, they're still brothers?
The Christian Brothers are still there, yeah. But they're not running it anymore, I don't think. Some of the teachers are Christian Brothers. Yeah, so here's some of the development that they accomplished. The airfield is not so much changed after the war, but I think, is this the north-south run? I think you can see the north-south runway now. Is this taxiway here actually goes somewhere, and then this is a runway. So they did have a north-south runway. Eventually that went back to farming. It wasn't there that long. This is a fantastic library. They've got a ton of books in there. I've been in there and used it a few times.
Are we welcome to do that?
Oh yeah, anybody can go to any university and use their library. You don't, not necessarily check out books, but as a guest you can go in. So they've got some old aviation books, like training manuals on various aircraft and stuff. Here's some of the newer stuff that they developed, residence halls and things like that. This is a kind of an aviation building right here, so focus on aviation training. Now there's some hangars and I think astroports and stuff springing up over here, or maybe that's over here. There's the astroports, yeah. Most of my friends parked their airplanes in these, and some had hangars actually over on this side of the airport. So we don't have the new terminal yet, but that's coming. So the Christian Brothers did a lot of development, and they turned it into a real world-class school. They got their accreditation in 1973, and they had a full catalog of courses you could take in languages, criminal justice, aviation, computer science, ambassador programs, all kinds of stuff. Political science, I suppose. So now we're fast forward to 1989. They've been working on this for about 8 years. The Port District wanted this airport. And Lewis wanted to they didn't want to lose the airport. They didn't want to run it anymore. They were trying to run a school. They wanted the Port District of Joliet to run the airport in a partnership kind of thing. They finally came up with a program there. I think it was a couple $1 million or something that they sold the airport for. 2.2 million.
Lewis sold the airport to the Port District for $2.2 million.
They sold the airport. Probably about 120 acres or something like that. High Court of Case. So they had to get some of these approvals and stuff, and they finally did get that. Here's the note I have on this says that the new airport had been the object of the Port District's desire since 1983, when the district and the university co-signed a purchase agreement. Now at last it could become the focus of a planned 37,782-acre ongoing expansion program.
15 minutes left. 15 minutes left, we gotta be out of here.
Yeah, we'll be out of here.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Just give
All right, so new light. I was involved in this a little bit. You see, I got to write the article for Sport Aviation. But the chapter wanted to give something back to Lewis because they'd been able to stay there actually for 20-some years. And so Lewis the airport needed a beacon. And the cost of a beacon was $63,000. So we found a federal program that if we could raise $3,000, the federal program would match it with $60,000, and they got their beacon. Moving ahead, you can see the new terminal.
Yep.
Right in here, yeah. Yep. If you've flown in there lately, this is where pancake breakfasts and stuff are now. A lot of this development on the east side or the north side of the airport is being removed.
That's all the old hangars.
Yeah, all the old Astroports were removed.
They're taking them out?
Mm-hmm.
That'll be darn.
In 2002, they got their north-south runway back. It's a mile long, a little more, I think. And here's the new terminal. Reliever Airport of the Year that year, I think, for O'Hare. Now they're getting a tower, so they want me to prepare a panel like that, having to do with some of the later things that they've done at the airport. These are artist conceptions, but this tower is used heavily every year for the NASCAR races that come to Chicago. And I've been on the tarmac during those NASCAR races with all those, have you? With all those jets coming in? Oh boy. But the tower is going to be a daily run, close at night kind of thing.
So it is going to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. So that's the history up to the present. Just to tell you a few quick things about our project, we made, as I said, about 22 of these panels. We had two kinds of panels. We had, first of all, there's Frank Goebel who conceived this whole thing. We had some about the times and what was going on, basically the material I just went over with you. We had some which we called local legends, which covered like the Hobolts, who were involved in a lot of things going on in Chicago. So we did the history panels. I got a lot of experience cutting mats in this project. And the local legends panels. Some of the names. These weren't all members or users of the airport, but they were Chicago Southwest, I think Maddie Laird, I can't quite read it. Art Chester, race pilot, of course Littlefields, the Hobolts, people who had something to do with the southwest suburbs of Chicago.
Is Gene still alive?
Who?
Gene Littlefield?
No, he passed away about 10 years ago. Cheryl's still around.
Cheryl's still around?
Yeah, she's nice.
Oh yeah, I knew them years ago, back in '84.
Did you? Did you live over there?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
It was Zimmerman.
Were you in Chapter 15?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Jim Click won it last year. You guys probably know him. He was a air show announcer at Oshkosh for a while, I think. Also a competitor. Arnie Zimmerman lived nearby. Clancy Hess, I was happy to see him get this. What a great old guy. Another World War II aviator. Al Luke. Carl Unger, Maddie Laird, Gene Littlefield, Art Chester. There's a lot of history there. This is the terminal building where we did our panels. Each of these little white blocks is one of these type panels. We have the opportunity to go around the corner here and do another 20 if we want. And I'm trying to persuade the team to let us do that. They're trying to cram them all in here because the fuel desk is up here and there's a bathroom here and people are more likely to see them here. But that's my presentation. Any questions? Thank you.
How did you get involved with 15?
With Chapter 15,
There, did you?
I went to an air show, one of those like we saw here, and I remember the first guy I talked to was Frank Goebel. I stood under a biplane and I said, and I was kind of half kidding, I know what a biplane is, but I was saying, these double wingers are really impressive to me, and, meaning I was interested in this construction of it. And Frank goes, it's called a biplane. And that was when I learned what a curmudgeon Frank Goebel